I whole ass shaved my face less than 12 hours ago. And it already looks darker than fuck. Nothing I can do about that. It's not long enough to be shaved again yet. I just walked into the loudest room in the fucking universe. Let me go back into the bathroom. You ever tried to duplicate something that never existed? Like maybe you imagine something and then you try to make that thing real, and then in the process you realize that that thing not having been real means that there was never necessarily a methodology to duplicate it. Like your whole cloth inventing a second thing in the image of a thing that wasn't even there. So that's complicated, and it's something we do all the time. I would even say probably most creativity, even this, right? This vlog, like a flash appeared in my mind of a few sentences and like concepts that I knew I could extrapolate through words into a video, but I did not plan out exactly what the video would be. I am literally, and none of this would have been included. You know, this sentence would not have been there if I had done that. But this is the natural result of me trying to duplicate. I'm gonna call it in this case, maybe misconception is the wrong word, but I will get into duplicating misconception is the most interesting angle on this. I'm duplicating an imagination. Again, something that wasn't there. There was no video of me explaining this that I am copying to create this video. There was an imagination of an idea of this video that I am copying, but that was never a thing that was real. So, a lot of the time, when we create something, it is out of having misconceived what something else is. Or rather, like, they say imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, right? But imitation is really hard to actually do, because most people who try to imitate something will quickly reveal the lack of depth at which they understand that thing. And if you ask anybody who's good at, say, impressions, like what makes you good at impressions, it's that you study everything about the person that you're trying to copy. You have to understand the way they move, the way that they behave, what their pattern of thinking is that leads them to speak in the way that they do. And it's a difficult art, of copying something, and it transforms who you are, because you now have dedicated a part of your life to copying something else. But no matter how closely you copy that thing, you cannot become that thing. You will always be at best a close approximation with certain misconceptions about what the thing actually was. And so, when I talk about like, what was the word I used in the title? Reproducing? I don't remember. When I talk about, trying to create something out of something that wasn't, that includes things that were, in the sense that your conception of them wasn't. Like when you are doing an imitation of someone, you're not really imitating them. You're imitating your conception of them, which did not exist. And even then, your performance is not the misconceived perception. It is simply informed by it. Like that, a misconceived perception isn't a thing. It only exists in your mind. When you perform it, you are recreating the misconceived perception which you had about the person initially in order to, attempt to interpret them. What got me thinking about this is I was thinking about how on two extremes of my personality, I'm either one of the biggest hardasses that I know or one of the softest babies that I know. And I've been wondering, why do I feel so preservative of my own softness? Like, I want to be able to continue to be soft, or to be as soft as I can, and like to extend softness to others. And when I think about it, I'm like, well, I feel as though when I was really young, like a baby or a toddler, or early childhood, that I was always around my mom, and my mom was very coddling and very soft. And so I think that my conception of self and my conception of how to be and how things should be, like what my relationship was supposed to be with the people closest to me, was created in those early years in the image of my mom. But as I've grown up and I understand her more and more, and I also understand that period in her life more and more, I understand how much she was always there, but like the influence she had on me goes way beyond what she was intending. Like, I saw everything that was going on, not just what she wanted me to. And so ultimately I was informed, like, by my conception of what she was doing back then. And now I look at it and I'm like, well, that was just not a real thing. Like, the relationship that I remember with my mom is my conception of something from back then, with very limited understanding of the actual circumstances surrounding me. And now that I'm grown up and I look back on it, I'm like, okay, I understand what this relationship must have been better. But it doesn't mean that my mind doesn't still conceive of it, that like I had this thing once, that at one point in my life I was in this consistently like soft, placating kind of environment where I was constantly relying on someone to be like the only anchor of any kind of reality holding together, because we were just constantly on the move through my early childhood. And I was very attached to things like furniture, and like would lose my shit over like losing something that like was really meaningless, but to me had a sentimental value because of the fact that it had been with me and not a lot of things were. So like I basically put all this extra emotional baggage into things based on how I looked at them. Whereas, again, like from a future perspective, looking back on it, I'm like, okay, but however much I might have, like, say, cared about a couch, that couch did not care about me. The people who made that couch did not care about me, They cared about getting the money for something they could do. The couch was probably shitty. It's not a couch I would want in perpetuity, It's just a couch that to me as a 5-year-old was like, oh my God, I'm losing my couch, And that was kind of how it felt about like my relationship with my mom as time went on. And it became more kind of strained, but in ways that I didn't want to admit or like face for myself. I kept basically hiding behind my conception that what our relationship had been before was what it was supposed to be, what it might eventually be, or something that I could, once I was an adult, develop with someone else and be like, oh, I can have that kind of extremely close, all the time trust, And I guess another way of putting it is that, like, I love my mom, but the trust was misplaced. Like, I, as a kid, putting all of my trust and reliance on somebody who didn't really know what they're doing means that I did not afford myself opportunities to have been taught by other people or have been reached by other mentalities. I feel like I was kind of really locked into this world because I was so my values were so determined by the people immediately around me. And so I looked at other values as competitive and incongruent. And now that I don't see it that way, now that I'm at a point in my life where I'm like, I wish my mom's worldview had been different, so that she would have raised me differently, and that I wouldn't feel like I was basically doing so much corrective work, like having to go back through my life and undo like that influence that, again, while it meant a lot to me at the time, I now view it as like, oh well, not all of this was a good thing to have been influenced by, or like, not all of these are ideas I should have taken with me about who I need to be and what life is supposed to be like. And it's not that I want to like abandon softness or anything like that, but I also see it from a much more utilitarian and like realistic perspective of like, this is something you don't just get to have. It was only even really extant in your mind because of how children are. And I think this is why most people look back on their past with like a kind of fondness, just because childhood mostly felt light. But to me, this bridge got crossed like really early. Like pretty much as soon as I started school, I felt the loss of my own innocence, that like in perpetuity from then forward, I just felt this continual sense of I don't feel like a kid anymore. I don't feel like I'm in that space, that comfort, that familiarity of what I expected reality to be. It all just kind of evaporated, and it felt like the floor was just falling out from me, under me, over and over and over and over and over again throughout most of my life. And as I look at it now, it's like you have to be very careful as somebody clinging to the edge of an infinite pit, that you climb up slowly and thoughtfully, and if you don't want to climb any further, you build yourself a nice perch with sturdy material, and you don't fuck around or try to, you don't build yourself a nice perch and then go, oh, I'm going to keep climbing now, because you're just going to fall onto your own perch and break it unless you build your next perch like just above it. I feel like most people just build themselves like an inch by inch ladder across their life. They just get a little bit more, a little closer, but by the time they're actually like enjoying the fruits of their labor, they are too old for it to really be fun anymore. And I've always hated that. I've always wanted to avoid that. But at the same time, Chutes and Ladders is a dangerous game. This metaphor has gotten too tortured for me to continue. My point is that if you're going to try to duplicate something that you just imagined and was never real, try your best to recognize that you are doing something completely new. Like, don't think of it as, oh, well, this person already did it once, or I already had this in the past. No, they didn't. No, you didn't. You are inventing a new thing. And you will always be inventing a new thing, because the past is always evaporating. And you only exist right now. Oops, right now. Oops, right now. You only exist right now. If you scroll back, you will not go... If you scroll back in the video, you will not disappear back in time to the part where I said that. You will just have been one of the few people who didn't experience the video in linear fashion. And God knows if anyone's even watching it at the same pace as you. Like, I don't know if anyone's at the same second in the video that you are at this moment, because it wasn't a premiere, and that's not that likely. Because it's a members only video also. But like, yeah, like you only exist in this exact second, and you cannot make something happen the same way it would have happened just back then. It can only continue to happen in a new way. So you will always be reinventing the wheel. You will always be doing the same thing you did before and that someone else did before, except that it will never be actually the same thing. It will be a recreation of a misconception of something that maybe happened or maybe didn't. All right, here comes the member. All right, shouts out to my members: Deep Talker, Water Fan, Ranila, Nathan Pugh, Rielian Friends, Super Chunk 121, Luna Lulu, Max Potion TCG, Isabel Incorporated, Zemq, Curbman, Crystalline Fos, Erratic Drop, Yakuman, Zydeas, Zinc, Radio Knights, Brianna W, Baba Gadusius, Petrichor VT, Pika Pika 2000, Sister of Scarlet, Kudere-kun, Mayday from Space, Spectral, The Mr. Grafixable, Oh My Guy, Yodiland Wizard, Commenter number 456, Spacey Filmer, Your Stuff is Cool, CC, Plague on Humanity, ASE Presents, Denacori, Brody, Z-Cypher, Gary Always, Gigadunk, Zerakiel, Zen Huxtable, Duncan264, Gassy Hall, Taperclip, and Night. Thank you all. Wow, we're up to 45. I was stuck at 40 for a hot minute there. Pretty excited to have you all here. So, yeah. Sorry about missing the last tier list Thursday also. But I'm going to put out a video today and tomorrow and a tier list on Thursday. Hopefully that'll make up for it. Alright.